Yeah, 2 seconds. All right, y'all. We've got some folks coming on. I think I'll start it off with like a quick update. Christy, it's good you're here. Last year around this time, there was a lot of hubbub, hey, Hannah, about struggles that we were having building relationships with farmers markets, that food hubs and farmers markets were having some tensions. And we talked about perhaps doing some outreach to the Farmers Market Association. And I just wanted to give you a quick update that we did do that. I've been talking to the Farmers Market Association for a while, and they did invite us to one of their monthly calls. And Christy Athens and Aaron Maidlow. I put Aaron M in the agenda, and I realized that we have two Aaron M's. So Aaron Maidlow and Christy Athens and Carrie Jeschow helped introduce food hubs to Oregon Farmers Market folks, and I think that went pretty well. Christy, would you say, yeah, they were reasonably receptive and interested in us? I think at the end, one of them was like, "Well, we want a food hub," which is kind
Yeah.
of hysterical.
Yeah. No, I thought it was good. I don't know how it will trickle down, but I think it was good to make that effort and make
Start
that
start
happen.
opening doors and building relationships. All
Mhm.
right. So, as many of you know, there was a 2-year implementation, regional food system partnership implementation grant that included a cohort of 8 hubs, many of whom are on this call on a regular basis, who are looking at a number of different things. Last month, we talked about the action plans that a couple of hubs put together for their climate resilience strategies. This month, we are going to talk about what hubs within that cohort looked at and built into their action plans for fair labor. So we have Sarah Sullivan from Gorge Grove Food Network, and we have Kim Johnson from Bohemia Food Hub, who are going to share what they're working on. And Sarah and Kim, I don't know which one of you wants to go first.
Can I go first because my kids are quiet right now?
Yes, sold.
Oh, and there's Leslie. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I just had like this is a place where I learned. It's hard to say the most because this whole experience has been like the most rich and rewarding and um, enriching experience. But the labor piece for me was huge because I gosh, I don't even know where to begin. So like our first action was like clear job descriptions. Like we haven't even hired staff yet at Bohemia Food Hub. It's still Kim Johnson is the one and only. And so I thought 2 years ago we were ready for staff. Thank God I did not hire staff 2 years ago because I was not ready for staff 2 years ago. So it's like going through this process really helped me like become more aware. Also, disclaimer, I've never built a nonprofit before. So, like, that happened at the same time that we transitioned to a nonprofit, a 501c3. And so now that's a whole bunch to learn about. And thank God we have such an incredible group of people because Sarah and Yana in particular have like helped me so far along the way to understand like what does staffing a nonprofit look like? Because that's very different than hiring labor for your food business, right? That's what I was experienced and familiar with before. So I've leaned so hard on learning from other hubs, which was like my actions, like specifically from my plan, learning from other hubs and writing out new hire positions before onboarding. Instead of just being so scrappy and willy-nilly, at some point we have to like tip into kind of professionalizing our hub. And that's been like a big piece that's been big work for me for 2 years now. And I've pretty much put the brakes on Bohemia Food Hub to catch up to where we are, to really like identify like what are the staff needs. If I was to leave, like what would it take to keep everything, just hold it where it's at. And so being really clear, and that's what I'm still working on right now actively, is articulating what 2 operating manager positions might even look like. What is the scope of work? And then, trying to like that enter at that high bar. So like super living wage salaries, incredibly generous salaries, and like learning that from Sarah, just like there's no, this is how we can start. And this is how you demystify getting health, like all the benefits. I've never done that. I'm not an HR person. So it's like us hubs, it's like there's so much that we're trying to lift all at the same time. And this one, I'm just really glad that I've learned as much as I have so that I can really like truly write in to grant submissions of a true 2 or 3 year funded position. So I'm also not feeling the scramble of I hired somebody and now I'm responsible for keeping them funded. So all of these things are kind of what I've learned. But also like one big piece too is now advocating more for also contract labor. So tenants in my kitchen, I was a tenant in my kitchen. I had a food business and I had labor, and I 1099'd them. I didn't know. I didn't understand what the impact of that was on the laborer. And so I've since learned a lot about like when is it okay to pay somebody and as a contract labor 1099, and then how can we also make payroll more affordable, which was the reason why I never tipped into when I had employees. I never paid payroll. I never did payroll, and that's very expensive. And so how are there ways here where this is something that opened up through it all, where it's like, okay, well, how can we remove that barrier for our food businesses so that they are, able to, what is the language that you use? It's like contract labor versus like an actual employee, right? See how much I'm still learning. So so those are kind of like where we're at. We're still like at the tiny baby stages. We'll hire probably toward the middle of this year, and we'll just take it really slow. The end.
Kim, I was just typing into the chat. I wanted to clarify for folks that you've talked a lot about contract labor, and what you're talking about is understanding when it's appropriate to use contract labor versus when it is appropriate to hire someone. And for this group, in Kim's case, she had chosen to work with somebody as a contractor that maybe would have been more appropriate to hire, but Kim, as the owner of that business at that time, didn't understand that. And so this contract worker ended up with a tax bill that was a real challenge for them to pay, because contract workers have to manage their own taxes, which is one of the differences on the receiving end of that employment structure. And for Kim, as she's understanding fair labor in her organization, a lot of it has been around creating a quality environment to hire someone into. And that means things like, as you talked about, Kim, job descriptions that are clear, thinking about how you structure your employees, whether they're contract or they're an actual employee. So Kim has focused hers a lot on this hiring part of how to approach fair labor. Sarah, I think, has landed in a different place in terms of your fair labor efforts. So I think the next step is to hear from Sarah, and then we can go to questions.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Kim. Tanya, I think you were going to try to share my PowerPoint here. Perfect. Great, and I can all see you in all my notes. So, hi everyone, Sarah Sullivan, Gorge Grown Food Network. I am always happy to be part of this group. I have a little PowerPoint. I want to thank my coworker Alexa, who's here, who created a lot of these awesome graphics and everything. If you ever want a superstar PowerPoint creator, she's your gal. So yeah, you can go to the next one. Like Kim said, this awesome cohort that we were able to be a part of. Oops. Yeah, we just sat down and talked about what is a good job and all of the complexity of that. And I especially appreciated this awesome document that Sydney shared with us that kind of just breaks it down in a simple way. So thinking about everything from, what is fair family sustaining pay? What kind of benefits do we want to see? Do people have a clear and equitable way of advancing in their salary and their career? And then just this sort of equity, respect, and voice piece. So obviously there's a lot of layers to this, but this is now kind of hanging on our office wall at Gorge Ground. So you can go to the next one. So this is a snapshot of what the 8 of us Food Hub leaders worked on, this little exercise, which I would really encourage everyone to think about in this way. So we talked about what's a good job in ways that actually cost money, and then what are things that don't cost money. So I know I want to recognize we're all probably restricted by our funding, and nonprofits are much different than for-profit businesses. Since we're able to garner grant funding, we may not be able to, or we may be able to pay at a different rate than say a restaurant operating on a really thin margin. So I just want to acknowledge that. But this just kind of a snapshot, but that me and my team kind of thought about. And the other folks that participated in this, some of them are here, Christy, Kim, really helped me think about different language and different ways of thinking about fair labor. So things like clear expectations, a sense of purpose, room to question and change organizational leadership, nice lighting, very important. If you've ever worked in an office with fluorescent light, drives me crazy. Just having a culture of kindness, team building. I know Sydney and Aaron talked about a sense of play, which is not my forte in the workplace as a, I don't know, recovering New Yorker. So I started thinking about that more. How do we create more levity in the workplace? So you can go to the next one. I'm just going to kind of focus in on wages and then workplace safety and benefits. So these are some of the tools that I use to advocate for my team within the culture of Gorge Grown. I will say it's been a 10-year journey for me. I've been at Gorge Grown almost 10 years starting in May. And we've come a long way, but it's been a really long haul. I will say, when I started, there was people being paid, I think, as low as $12 an hour. I was offered $42,000 when I started, and advocacy began in my interview when I said, I think this is a completely inappropriate wage for what the job description says. And then, of course, it was on me to raise more funding for myself and others. But I think just, from like an employee's perspective and employer's perspective, just really thinking about what does a living wage mean for you? And I don't even know if that's the right term, right? So this little chart here is taken from this link at the bottom, which is a really helpful tool, the MIT salary calculator. And this is for Hood River County, so it's even higher living wage for Multnomah County and other places. But you can say living wage for someone with no children is almost $25 an hour. If you have 3 kiddos, $81 an hour. Minimum wage isn't really a living wage for anyone in Oregon. So yeah, so this is the kind of thing I present to my board, the kind of thing I think about when I think about fair pay. So I also really recommend consulting with other employers. I have an awesome executive director support group in the Gorge, and we actually share not always salaries, because some of that's confidential, and in a super small rural community, you want to be mindful of, you might know who's in a position over there, but we share things like, what are we doing about cost of living wages each year? What are we doing about salary studies? Those can be pricey, but if you talk to other bigger nonprofits, a lot of them are doing right now, because we recognize that salaries across the board and nonprofits are really kind of low compared to other sectors. So yeah, just an example of something, I'd put in an email to my board this past year. So as of January 2024, federal employees will receive a 5.2 raise. This is the largest federal raise we've seen since 1980. Social Security benefits increased from 8.7 in 2023. So you can gather this data really easily by Googling and kind of make a case for, like, inflation is happening. People, like federal employees, are getting the largest wage increases we've seen in many years. So yeah, and then I think just none of us are probably exactly where we want to be with salaries, myself included. And I think my staff know that. I think it's really important to be really open and transparent with your coworkers or with your supervisors. And I think as, a leader, if anyone else is in a managerial or executive role, it's important to be able to hear from your staff, like, I'd like to make more, right? So next slide is just an example of salaries in other sectors, which is always kind of sobering to look at. This is just, I'll put the link in the chat here, but Washington State average salaries. And so one thing it's really hard to do in our world is find, like, an equivalent position somewhere, right? Because I feel like I'm a human resource person. I do stuff with payroll. I do, you might do marketing as well. Some of you are in transportation. So yeah, just look at these different salaries. You might find yourself thinking, like, why didn't I become a dental hygienist or something? Yeah, I think that's one thing my fellow nonprofit EDs and I talk about a lot is if we keep comparing, like, you look at nonprofit salary comparators, that's nice. Maybe you can move up to those wages, but if we keep comparing low salaries in our field to low salaries, they're never going to really go up compared to other sectors. So, okay, I think next slide. So a little bit about workplace safety. I am sad to say that I've had 2 employees get very hurt on my watch, which no one wants to happen. And it's essential to have workers' comp insurance. In Oregon, ours is called SAFE. And those 2 employees were able to collect workers' comp while they were healing from workplace injuries. So really grateful again for everything that the Food Hub Club and Oregon Community Food Network has done to create all these amazing materials that someone can link in the chat, but this is, you get that link and you're like, I should look at that one day. Look at this, you guys. It's everything you need to give to your staff, to put in your van, to put in your restaurant, etc. Really practical stuff on lifting and thinking about other things that might happen that maybe you haven't really worked through, like workplace harassment. We deal with a lot of wildfire smoke in the gorge, extreme heat. And then, yeah, we also had this company, Safety Northwest, come out and do a really great thorough inspection of our mobile market program and make some really helpful pointers that were, again, really important for avoiding injury in the future. Like, you know, this lift gate needs very clear instruction for, you know, pamphlet for anyone who's new, that kind of thing. Yeah, and into our personal policy, we've added these pay practices. So any shifts that are canceled due to wildfire smoke, which we deem as 150 AQI and higher, people get paid. And that again came from direct feedback from staff who, you know, their shifts canceled, they don't get paid that week or for even a day, and it really impacts their financial security. And then hazard pay for frontline staff, we paid $3 extra during the pandemic, things like that, that make people feel more appreciated when they are just in a little bit more danger because of the world we live in. Okay, next slide. Shout out to Alexa's little radish here. So these are the employee benefits that we have worked up to offering. We have gold tier medical and dental. That's through this broker. I'd really recommend Blackbird Benefits, woman-owned brokerage company. She'll work with you even if you have 1 or 2 employees. We have a retirement match. We have all this paid time off. We have bereavement leave. Again, you know, catalyzed by people experiencing loss, and are they supposed to take, you know, paid time off for that? Family medical leave, and then we had paid parental leave up to 2 months even before this started, but paid leave, Oregon now provides 12 to 14 weeks for family medical or safe leave. And then, yeah, professional development work, work equipment like standing desks or, you know, ergonomic things to keep people more healthy when they're doing screen time so much. And we have room to grow. There's lots of other nonprofits that offer things like life insurance, 4-day work week, sabbatical. It's one of the things I'm really advocating for right now. Like, come on, 10 years in. Childcare is a huge issue. So I'm kind of talking to other nonprofit leaders, like, could we one day go in on some child care together? Yeah, so the one thing that really like struck me during our cohort, our learning experience was someone, I think it might have been you, Sydney, or somebody smart said something about a like dignified workspace. And part of our workspace is okay, and part of it was really not. We'd inherited this really funky, you know, very scrappy, nonprofit-y space. So you can go to the next slide, Tanya. This hideous little space on the left, you can see like wires hanging. There's whatever the drop ceiling thing's missing. There was some taxidermy squirrel there from the previous nonprofit that was in the space, which I felt like was haunting the room. So yeah, we raised some funds to renovate that, replace the flooring. So this is what it looks like on the right now. You know, we're not the fanciest nonprofit, and we got some IKEA furniture, but we're trying to do better. And it feels just great to have like a more professional meeting space than we have. And I remember when I started at Gorge Ground, I made a comment to a colleague about our horrible chairs. I'm like, this shows like we're humble and scrappy. And he was a grant writer, and he just said, no, it doesn't. Like, absolutely not. You can do better. So I always remembered that and really appreciated that inspiration to do that. So last slide. This is just a note about kind of working beyond our own agencies. So when the pandemic hit, there was people in the gorge that were expressing concern about our amazing migrant farm worker community that is essential for picking fruit where we live. And so this migrant and seasonal farm worker initiative sparked up, and we secured funds for this local artist to create this Essential campaign to raise awareness about how important farm workers are in our region, and just to make farm workers feel more welcome when they arrived. And we'd also advocated for protections for farm workers at the legislative level that many of the local orchardists were really pushing back against, like requirements for spacing between beds and farm worker housing and hand washing stations, that kind of thing. So always trying to work on food justice sort of above and beyond our own organization. And I think that's all I got. There's one more slide with that's Alexa and our mobile market. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. There were a couple of questions that were in the chat. I think Abigail had one about how many staffers you have. And then I'd like to open it up for questions.
Yeah, it fluctuates well over the years and throughout the year. Usually we're at about like 4 or 5 FTE with a bunch of contractors. We've been as big as 8 or 9, and right now bare bones in the winter we're like 3.5. And just to be honest, I mean, all of this stuff obviously costs a lot of money, like all of the benefits and everything. And so right now we are really, we're slimmer in our staff because we want to do the best we can for our few full-time employees. So to Kim's point, sometimes that does mean scaling back to do better for the folks that are on our team right now. And I'd had a board member ask me, like, when I was presenting budget this year, are these salaries sustainable? And it's like, are they ever in any world, like any business? I mean, we hope so, but wondering if we're going to have the money next year doesn't mean we don't do as good as we can this year. Know what I mean?
Yeah. Other questions from this group?
Someone said, what is full-time? So people working above 3/4 time, so 30 hours a week, are eligible for all of the benefits, but like to the percentage that they work. So if they work 30 hours a week, we cover 75% of their health care, for example. And yeah, we're not able to offer health benefits and such for people that work less than that yet.
Other questions in this group?
Can I ask about your board and like how you've gotten them on board? Are they like long-standing board members? Were they on board right away, or did you have to like really advocate for this, or how did you navigate that whole thing?
It's been a journey. I think, yeah, carefully selecting board members that are fair-minded is really important. When I first started, I didn't have all the support I needed. I actually had a board member tell me that she didn't think I deserved the raise I was asking for because she had never made that much. And I was like, that is women keeping women down. So that person deserves a, what do you call it? Coaching out. I can talk to you more about offline, but no, I think you need a really good board that understands us and supports these things. And all that data is really important. I mean, I really do have to make a case every year. Not that they're not supportive, but they, you need to kind of paint a story, a picture.
Other questions, specific questions for Sarah or for Kim while we have them?
Can I just ask real quick, what does your development team look like? Or like, what does your development budget look like?
I wish I had a development team. It's basically me, grant writing. I have some support from one of my awesome superstars who's been also at Gorge Ground for 10 years, Hannah Ladwig. She does like a big fundraising dinner and more of our business support work. That's basically it. Yeah.
Other questions? Thank you so much, Sarah, for walking us through all of that. I would like to emphasize that, you know, I don't know if you noticed that both Sarah and Kim took really different approaches to addressing, you know, the ideals of creating a better workplace and having a workplace that fosters a fair labor environment. But that you could be starting anywhere with that. You know, fair labor could encompass a lot of different things. It encompass worker safety. It can encompass having a dignified workplace. It can encompass, you know, the nitty gritty of HR resources. And yes, pay is definitely a part of it. And we all know that. But there's also a real recognition that every single one of you are in a different place in your organization. If you're a nonprofit, you may have board support issues. If you're a for-profit, you may have margin issues. So no one's here to beat anybody up about taking a different approach. But I think what we want to illuminate as a network is that we should be thinking about what fair labor can look like in our organizations and how we can make choices to improve our workplace. We have lots of resources as a network, like Sarah said, and I dropped in the chat the link to the worker safety resources. Those are all available. The network has been doing some on-site worker safety evaluations that the network has paid for. Please come to me if you're interested in having more of that, because I'm planning on contracting for more of that kind of support from our safety contractor. There are lots of things that we can do that are not enormously costly to our organizations, but they take us having a proactive thought process about making sure that we're improving our workplaces. All right. That was really great. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate both of you taking the time to put that together and share with us. All right, now we are moving on to Hannah Kuhlberg, Kristen Penner, and Mackenzie. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Mackenzie. We'll be talking
feeling like, are you
Feeling.
having a good time? Yep.
Are you feeling a good time?
You
Perfect.
feeling a good time?
They will be talking to us about manufactured food products and working on local sourcing and what that can look like, what that can mean.
Yes,
Take it away.
jump in. Hey everyone, I'm Hannah. If you don't know me, I work at the intersection of food systems and packaged food businesses. And I was psyched to be able to partner with the Good Food Foundation on educating and sharing something that's really sort of near and dear to my heart around farm direct sourcing for packaged food makers. And we have some rock stars in the room that are like inspirations for me. Nikki Guerrero, Hot Mama Salsa, with the beautiful pink background. Kristen Penner's here. She's jumped into owning Hot Winter Hot Sauce this year and really, you know, processing farm directs at a pretty large scale, right? Like smaller makers get to sort of move their way up. And then, you know, Kristen jumped 2 feet in. So really amazing. And so this presentation I thought would be a really great opportunity to sort of bring up some conversation around how could food hubs sort of operate and show up in this middle and create some discussion for all of us. And also it is part of a grant that the Good Food Foundation received, especially Crop Block grant. And I honestly, if you all are not connected to the Good Food Foundation, I thought that would be really amazing for this network as well, because you're all connectors in your regions and working. I know a lot of you work primarily with farms, but you're also connected to all these amazing good food makers out there. And the Good Food Foundation, as Mackenzie's going to get into, is this really great next step opportunity for growing in sales and marketing for that emerging maker who's done the farmers markets, has like some local retail, and applying for their awards or going to a mercantile can really be that next big kind of launch in their business. And I really want to make sure that that's getting out to all of rural Oregon, because, all the Portland, entrepreneurs know all about it, but we need to spread the word about this opportunity out there. So I'm going to pass it off to Mackenzie, and then I'll circle back.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks so much, you guys, for including me in this. I'm not going to take up too much time to talk about the foundation, but as Hannah said, I think it's really cool to get it on your radar because it is a national organization, and so there's participation from all over the country. But something we really would like to work on is having there be more rural representation. And so you probably heard about the Good Food Foundation or seen the little seals that show up on packaged goods in a lot of specialty grocery stores, but also just across grocers everywhere. And that's just one of our programs. So I'm going to tell you about the other ones and give it back to Hannah, but we can circle back with questions you might have about how you can get involved. So we have sort of 4 verticals. The awards is what you might be most familiar with. We have mercantiles, which is what we, call basically, it's like a trade show, but it's not pay to play like you would find at so many other sort of booth type events. This is really sort of democratized, and I'll tell you a little bit more. We have the Guild, which is the group of crafters that sort of pay a subscription fee, but that means that they get to have a table at every mercantile. It also means that their product is already vetted per our standards. I'll spend a little more time on that later. And then we have the Alliance. And that is a group of retailers who are sort of committed to finding distribution pathways and avenues to get these makers, these guild makers, into their grocery stores. So the Guild, this is something that is like a great sort of entry point for the folks that are in your communities and in your networks. To join the Guild, you basically have to be making food of a certain standard. And for every category, it's a little bit different. We have 18 categories, but they're pretty rigorous. We really want to venerate sort of the best foods coming from people who really care about provenance and how foods are being grown, and also the people getting their hands in it. We think about the farm workers and the business owners. And so I believe that it's $500, and to be involved, it actually subsidizes quite a few of your booth fees. But it also just means that you have access to other folks and also resources that we designed just for the Guild. The awards, this is actually coming up, and I would love to invite all of you. You would be welcome as our guests in Portland at the end of April. We tried to make it a night of pomp and circumstance, because it's sometimes not very glamorous to be doing the work of some of our crafters, but we want it to feel really, really special and have these moments of acknowledgement. So you can see featured here is Alice Waters, Michael Pollan. These are folks who come and sort of decorate our award winners every year. And then we have the mercantile. There will also be a mercantile in Portland. And again, you are also welcome to come, and you probably will have folks that you work with showcasing there. It's a sort of industry-only event where retailers come to just forge new connections and try new products and get to know makers and sort of discuss ways and avenues to get onto the shelves. And then lastly, we have an alliance, and this is a group that I work with really closely. These are specialty grocers from all across the country who pledge a certain amount of money to the foundation to help, tackle problems holistically and be there to support the crafters. So they are always in attendance at award shows and mercantiles and have a commitment to featuring products in the Good Food Consortium on their shelves. So it's to them that we owe a lot of gratitude. They've really helped catalyze a lot of change for us and get a lot of new, smaller companies on the shelves that don't already have distribution partners. It's really special, the sort of commitment that they all have. So I just wanted to share that about the foundation. I'm really grateful to Hannah for working with me on this presentation because our goal is to share it with a lot of crafters. And so this is something that you could distribute to the folks you work with, because we just want to basically use this grant money to help sort of bolster the representation we have across the state of Oregon. So I'll maybe give it back to Hannah and then we can conclude with questions at the end.
Awesome. Yeah. So, as Mackenzie mentioned, we are diving into farm direct sourcing, and we've been giving this to organizations or classes like Getting Your Recipe to Market. We're going to be giving it in to Business Impact Northwest, an incubator program they have. And so these slides are a little bit more oriented to the entrepreneur, but I'm hoping this can be sort of like a train the trainer and also a way we can think about how food hubs can intersect and show up here and help solve some of these problems. So next slide. I want to just like start with talking about the status quo and where things are at. So, and just to kind of ground things, my background is in starting a food business with my dad, and I did this right out of college and was like, you know, totally naive and big-eyed. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to build this amazing regional brand and only source from local farmers. And we were able to do that to some extent. We had safflower oil from Eastern Oregon. We were getting our beans from a few different organic bean farmers in Idaho, Eastern Washington. And I thought, you know, as we scaled, we're just going to grow our impact and continue to grow our impact. And actually what happened was the exact opposite. And what we heard over and over again from our advisors was that we need to get our costs down. We need to get our cost of goods down, and we need to do that through labor and our processing time and our inputs, right? So both of, I mean, just this whole conversation earlier is so potent for this, right? Because in food processing, folks aren't paid well either. And there's a big conundrum at that small level. And actually what happens, right, is operators are kind of doing their processing themselves and not paying them and working really, really long hours and not even maybe putting that on staff. And like, how do we step in with like good jobs and maybe some thoughtful equipment in places? Like that's what's on top of mind for me. So anyways, you're like, you got to reduce the cost of goods. You got to do this through labor and your inputs. And the reality is that processing fruits and vegetables is really labor intensive. So at, you know, Better Bean, we peeled our tomatillos until we couldn't. And actually what we saw was our, we started to get more and more industrial ingredients. So pre-processed and frozen ingredients that would come in. And that's what we see. There's this decision point for entrepreneurs of, you know, are you going to work farm direct and get that local garlic and peel it yourself? Or are you going to buy the pre-packaged, pre-peeled garlic that might be coming from China? We used garlic powder, for example, and we had to specify to our suppliers that we just wanted it even from California and pay more for it to be from California, let alone sort of the local farmer that, you know, we grow so well right here. And so, as I've been saying, this leads businesses to avoid processing fruits and vegetables and source pre-processed. And that's a business of scale. And it means that we're not actually sourcing from small farms and working with unique varietals. But there are these amazing makers out there that are really going uphill rather than the easy flow down the hill. They're not listening to the advice. And this is something that in my kind of next life that I've been in now since being in business is I try to think more creatively or push back against this idea that you need to just constantly get your costs down, reduce your price to compete in market and, you know, grow your margin. Yes, I want you to have a strong margin. Yes, I want, you know, you to have a viable business, but how do we support businesses to be successful at smaller scales or to do this seasonal local, make seasonal local products, seasonal processing? What can this look like and how do we do this? And again, there's some really amazing makers in our community that have decided to walk the harder path, and they've come up with some really cool creative things that they've done. So we'll kind of dive into some of these challenges and the solutions that I've seen out there. And I really just welcome anyone to offer challenges, solutions in the chat or chime in. Mackenzie, you can do the next slide.
I just wanted to say, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to suggest a possible solution. Could
Please.
some of the local food purchasing funding that the USDA is supplying, I mean, hopefully, it continues on, but maybe that could subsidize some of the local food purchasing, because I really feel strongly about locally, sourcing locally to build our local food economy, but I know that that's difficult for makers, like you said, with the profit margin.
Shante, I'm so curious to learn more about that. I think I saw you post about it the other day, and I actually am not as aware of like this USDA funding. And on the next slide, I was thinking about you all too, because you've been buying local products that might have not met like the quality standards that someone was looking for. And I think that's a really cool solution as well. I don't know if you're able to like share any resources in the chat right now, but I really appreciate that. I'm going to share right now too, totally off cuff, that there's an opportunity right now to do some advocacy at the Oregon state legislature and federally, right? Of like, how do we support our food and beverage processing committee? So it's very food and beverage processing focus. It's under the Oregon Business Council, and there's some like really big food businesses and representatives of large food business involved. And I'm doing my best to sort of pull in those who are working with smaller food makers and food processors. But I've been sort of toying with this idea of like, how do we regionalize our supply, and what are those key things that we need to do that? And is it something sort of very similar to the farm to school program, where we're subsidizing the purchase of local food so we can grow that system together? So Shante, I'd love to talk more about that. So back to the presentation. Cash flow is a huge part of this, right? A lot of makers are buying what they need that week, making it and selling it as the best that they can, right? And when you grow into wholesale, cash flow gets even more difficult because you're not getting that cash, right? Like you're waiting for a distributor to pay you, or you're waiting for the store to pay you for many, many days. And so producing all of your product, say if you're making a jam or pickles or something like that, where you can do seasonal production, it's really, you have to like put all your cash up right at once. And a lot of these makers don't have the cash to do that. And so I've seen people fundraise for it. I've seen pre-sales for products. Nikki, I'm pretty sure you have a really awesome waiting list for some of your hot sauces. I mean, those are just small solutions. And then kind of getting creative with your ingredients. I work closely with Sasha Archer, who runs Sabi Shrubs, and she freezes for her bigger runs of product that she needs. She freezes the produce to sort of get ready for that run when she's able to sort of save cash to do that. But also she's freezing it and then able to process it and put in those other inputs slowly or over time. But that's not always an option for all ingredients. So what, maybe there's also some really cool loan solutions here. Next slide. Yes, so the dead products, right? I think this is why some people are afraid to get a little bit more creative. Another thing that is said over and over again in all of the advice given to food businesses. I used to teach in the Getting Your Recipe to Market program. We'd say, develop 3 SKUs, focus on those, get them to market. And that doesn't allow for sort of this creativity of making something seasonal or more unique, or working with a farmer on something. And I've seen some more unique products. I think one of the salsa of the weeks from Nikki was arugula salsa. It was amazing, but definitely a more unique one. Sasha's made it was one of my favorites, like a carrot anise shrub, and it wasn't a favorite, and she had the it in stock for a really long time. But if you have sort of this, the salsa of the week idea is a really amazing way because it gets people really excited, and it's one time only, or a product club where people are buying into your seasonal product. Sasha has a shrub club, and every month everyone buys into that local, locally made, locally sourced product, and they get some of the funny, weirder ones. But that's okay. That's what they signed up for. And then you know, Freedom Foundation's been doing some cool stuff with Black food makers, that they're buying those products that don't quite meet the standards. And there's also Grocery Outlet. I know that's maybe not our like local food systems, but they're actually independently owned, and you can reach out to that store in your community and sell your product to them. Next slide. So some people are afraid to do this because they might run out of supply, right? In our case at Better Bean, we actually quickly scaled out of that local safflower farmer because we were making too much and they couldn't supply as much. And I mean, that's its own, you know, if we had sort of a different reality, this is like 15 years ago, maybe we could have helped, you know, get right equipment in place or involved other farmers. But what I've seen, especially you know, Sarah Marshall from Marshall's Oat Sauce, what she's done really well is she makes limited run products, and she actually creates a lot of like FOMO. And so it's a really exciting thing that this is only available for a limited time, and just really shifting the sort of the mindset that it has to be on the shelf at the grocery store all the time with that SKU and that UPC code. It's actually like, no, this is seasonal, this is here right now, so you get it now and enjoy it now. Next slide. As I've talked a lot about, the self-processing of vegetables is super time and labor intensive. And this is where I'm so curious about if food hubs can get involved. And one of the makers I really like to think about is Jessica from La Porteña. She makes the chimichurri, and she's tried so many different things with her product. She has to use fresh parsley, and she's tried freezing, she's like explored drying it, but she has to use fresh parsley. So she sources from local farms and the smallest ones when she cans, and then she fills in from larger farms, larger local farms, and throughout the season, and then works with organically grown in the deep of the winter, right? And she kind of moves through all of this, but that's a lot of extra work on her. And then she's also processing that. And so she's been working really closely with her farmers of like, how do you save time? How do I save time? Oh, you don't need to bunch the parsley. You can leave it open in a box. Working on the washing and the standards around that. And then you know, there's equipment, right, that can work for different things, continuous feed robocos, dicers, peelers, pitters, that kind of thing. And then I think the thing that I like to communicate to a lot of entrepreneurs is, you know, we're the sort of the Instagram game, the social media game, you want a lot of good content. So what a better way to have beautiful content if you have, you know, farm fresh produce coming in and you're out on a, you know, farm picking it up, or you're receiving something from a farmer. And so I think that's the silver lining, is that you get a lot of really great content for your business. So fresh product, and I think I really just talked to this with the example of Jessica from La Porteña, but looking at, you know, is there another way that you can make your product to still work with fresh, or just make it seasonal and that's it. So that's enough on that slide. I want to talk about another challenge, just that harvesting windows are shifting, and this can make coordinating production much more challenging, especially if you're working in a shared use kitchen or a co-packer, right? You've got your Wednesday time slot set, but then, you know, the cucumbers aren't ready for that. How do we, as either shared use commercial kitchen folks or co-packers, or what, how do we support in that way? Can actually, yeah, a food hub be an aggregator of the cucumbers while they come on until they're ready to process? Or where can we find that flexibility? And for, you know, the maker, they might again have to get creative with pre-processing steps or find a dedicated kitchen. Next slide. This all sounds nice, but what if the crops fail or the seedlings don't germinate? And, you know, Kristen, I'd love for you to share a little bit on this, but I think that ultimately we just need to, if crops fail, we need to talk about it. If this, you know, the seeds don't germinate, we need to talk about it, because these are the realities of farming and working with seasonal crops that is different and as what is kind of unique for this. But then also the backup plan for a maker might actually be sourcing from more conventional markets. And is this maybe again an opportunity for a food hub to come in and say, oh, I know another farm who has this. I'm the connector here. I can support you in this. Kristen, do you want to jump in on anything? I just want to really like allow you to share your voice as well. I don't know where you are in the world here, but
Hey, sure, Hannah. Yeah, I'd also love to hear from Nikki about her experience, because I know Hot Mama is on a much larger scale and further advanced than I am. But yeah, most of you know me. I'm Kristen Penner. I work with a lot of food hubs here on the coast in the role of a value chain coordinator. And last summer, was working to try to find makers that wanted to work with seaweed. Came across a hot sauce company that was really intending to just sunset the company. And so it was a unique situation to look at what did it mean to purchase an existing company that already had the production kind of dialed in and was working with local growers, as well as growing a lot of the peppers for his sauce himself. So yeah, it just seemed like such an interesting moment to get to work with a good friend and colleague, Kim, who was speaking earlier at Bohemia, get to really learn more about Bohemia Food Hub, how it operates. So I did purchase Hot Winter in April of last year, so just about a year. It was just enough time to reach out to local farms and see, you know, who was willing to work with us on a contract. Really triangulate around getting the seeds to the transplant company to plant. There's just so many moving parts, and if you don't meet the windows of these parts of the process by a certain time, you kind of lose the opportunity. So yeah, it was really interesting.
Kristen, can you speak a little bit more to that? So, because, you know, my eye-opening moment this last year on the farm was that all our pepper seedlings got eaten by mice. We had to replant them. And it sounds like you've kind of taken a little bit of risk out of the supply chain by working with this transplants business. Is that true?
You know, that was great. Sean was the founder of the company. He had kind of done a combination, a hybrid model. And honestly, he was a farmer that started a hot sauce company, was sourcing most of his peppers, and then in the effort to save costs, started farming again. But also just to be able to experiment with different types of peppers, including one that he was growing himself that had like his own variety that he had developed. So yeah, the germination rates that's a real thing. And we had a couple farmers, one farmer that basically didn't have a crop at all, like his germination rates, like it just didn't grow. And then we had yeah, like worked with another farmer on the coast who was willing to try to grow peppers for at scale for the first time. Ended up with quite a lot of unexpected pest issues. So the plants were great, but then the peppers, once they started maturing, got eaten. And so really didn't have the crop there. So definitely had to pivot, definitely reached out, you know, last minute at the end of harvest season to see who else had what. There's several networks out there that are amazing, just like this one, resource sharing. And so I can't say enough about like the magnitudes I've learned about the Oregon food system and just falling more in love with it. But yeah, I could go on and on, but there's I think some real ways that food hubs can really activate local sourcing and providing opportunities for local farms who want to grow a specialty crop, who want to kind of like tiptoe into this. I know Kiara works with in the Forge Farmers Collective, kind of has started doing some crop planning in the winter. And so bringing in some local food manufacturers to those conversations who are seeking to source locally is a really interesting thing. But yeah, I think communication, like just figuring out a way to communicate about what's in season, who has extra cold storage capacity. I want to give a shout out to Shelly at Lane County Bounty, who was like, heck yeah, you can store 2 pallets of peppers here. We got space, just have the farm deliver them here instead of to Kim's. Yeah, I think there's a lot here, and I love, Hannah, that you're really kind of showing the different aspects of ways that we can work together to support both our farmers as well as our makers. So I don't know if you have more specific questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I don't want to take up
I
all the
want
time here.
to highlight what you said about space, because again, I think this is something that's interesting for food hubs to jump in around with, I mean, with your product both, right? You need fermentation space for doing it, but then there's the sort of like in and out of that storage. I know again, Sasha, who I work with, she's coming up to a space constraint. She's having freezer storage space issues, and then just end product storage issues. But if we want to be working, you know, and help these small makers scale up with local products, we need to provide the space for that, because a lot of the commercial kitchens out there, it's tight space to work in. There's not room to and that's why Bohemia is actually unique, right? In the larger equipment, but it's like the space even to work in, what you can bring in, what you can process in a day, doesn't necessarily, you know, help them scale up that local sourcing. Shantae, I saw your hand.
Yeah. Just thinking about that, like maybe this is a question for later, like for the scalability for makers, like what size kitchen would be helpful? You know, we're thinking about like building out commercial kitchen space at our new regional food hub. And you know, I'm just curious about like what would be a good size for makers and also for our farmers that we're working with. And maybe this is something we can talk about offline, but I was curious about that. And then I can't remember my other question, but oh, it was about what systems or what like software are people using for aggregation? You know, like with fresh sheets and stuff you're getting coming in from farmers. How are, you know, what is the tech behind that folks are using to make your lives easier?
I definitely don't have all the answers there. I'll like point back to Sydney and the group here. I do think that aggregation one is also super interesting, because that's where a food hub could come in, right? It's like a maker might be like, this is too complicated. And you know, in our small, when we were small at Better Bean, we worked just with like a regular produce distributor. And the thing that was nice is I could just submit my order and they'd get that to us the next Monday or whatever. And they're dealing with where it was coming from in season, right? And it's like, could a food hub be that piece instead? But yeah, I don't have answers around that. And I think Sydney would be a really good one to talk to about size. I think it's like, it's always too small is what I've seen. Obviously you can go too big, but like the ones that I've toured, you know, can you actually move pallets of product in and out of both your walk-in and your freezer? Can can you store storage? The red is our, Portland, and one of my closer experience, and the freezer space is just like kind of constantly maxed out. And so users in the red have ended up going outside of the red for more freezer storage. Actually Holly here, I think, has a really cool example of, she's got storage fridge space, but she's also got a walk-in that's dedicated for day of processing. So it's always empty. You have to empty it at the end of the day. And that's kind of like another neat one. Yeah, fulfillment space, Nikki, that's huge. So anyways, I'll open it up because there's so many other smart people in this space on this. Shelley? I don't
Yeah, hey, I'm in my car. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay, great. I'm a farmer who then moved into value-added processing and then moved into food hub territory. So I've got a couple of those hats. And on our farm, once like a product that I made with things that we grew became popular, it became this like chicken or egg question. Like, are we growing this because we're growing it for fresh market, or are we growing it because it's become a part of our value?
Uh-oh.
Kristen about her challenges finding peppers, and then like wanting more people to grow those peppers. So I'm interested in kind of flipping this script from like, how can we get exactly the ingredients that we need for these processing products or projects, to like, how can we look for what's already in excess and filter that into processing? Like, how can we capture the waste as opposed to working on like hot season crops that might be extra challenging for farmers? So it's kind of like, who are we supporting? Are we supporting the consumer and having a regular product that's reliable all year round? Are we supporting farmers in making sure that there's market for bumper crops? And what's the goal? And coming from a value-added processing place, I know that consistency is so critical. So it's kind of like you have to pick your priorities. And I would love to see more of those seasonal products come out of kitchens that are really related to, preventing waste of agricultural product and just waste for farmers.
Yes.
That's it. That's my input.
You're getting a lot of nodding heads, Shelley. Like, yeah, we're with you.
So good. Kristen, did you want to share?
There we go. Yeah, I would like to echo that from Shelley. Like, when I went to talk with the primary farmer that we worked with last year, we started talking about the fact that the only co-packer in the region had recently shut down and sold their business. And so the equipment was leaving the region. And I said, I've heard this in a lot of places, like, and they're like, oh, wow, yeah, like, we actually had all of our B grade heirloom tomatoes processed there and then, made into a tomato and pepper enchilada sauce and marinara that then we could put into our CSA boxes. Now I think that's a big like question mark, like where can those extras go? What do people want to grow? What grows well? What can what can we afford to pay for, but then also like afford to just help move into the system. I'm gonna put a couple more thoughts in the chat here, but just like composting solutions for like the food scraps, like connecting with farmers and coordinating on that kind of aggregation and pickup. Temporary workforce housing solutions, or just kind of like how can we train up folks that can work seasonally and help support multiple makers or farmers in that, like, everybody gets busy at this one time, but to Shelley's point with some strategic planning too, like there's ways to kind of provide more opportunities for those skills like throughout the year by like you said, Hannah, like being able to freeze some of the things and process them later. Keep the kitchens busy like during their slower times. But yeah, I want to also just say a huge shout out to Good Food Foundation because they supported Bohemia with having a table for like 4 different producers to come to the food festival and made that financially possible. And grants helped, provide some support there as well for the booth space. But yeah, those makers got exposure and that led to sales. That was huge. Yeah, and then also just kind of like coming back to like, we've got such a like engaged network here. So really finding like the right size equipment for right size operations or kind of helping like lead those conversations where it's like, oh, like what's the solution that could help like 4 different farmers or whatnot. Garlic is a big one. I know that, we source a lot of organic garlic and it's very time consuming to peel it, as it turns out. And also there's on the North Coast, someone that's like really interested in, they're making like black garlic, fermented black garlic as a value add and looking at, like how can we create solutions for farmers to have that value added equipment on their own farm if they want to be able to preserve some of the things. So I saw your comment on that, Tanya, and I just wanted to say that is really relevant, I think, for farmers. Like as we talk about like, well, who pays for all of this stuff with the rising costs? I think there's some ways where we can find those products that Oregon can excel at making and can really help bring more value back to the producers and cover these costs. But I think if we can all be stronger together, like Hannah always says, by pooling our mental capacity as well.
Awesome. I know we kind of like just ended on this like distribution. We really should like of the whole thing, but obviously distribution is another piece of it. I think a lot about again, Sasha, I just got this here, so I'm thinking about her, but these are Feijoa guava seasonal shrub that she made, and she went to a U-Pick farm and picked it with her staff, right? She's doing a lot of trips to the farms, but then it's like, oh, is that farmer coming in for another reason? Can they bring it to you? What are these creative solutions? And again, I think this is an opportunity for food hubs to kind of step in and offer that solution, especially when that business starts to scale up a little bit more and are at that point of being maybe 5 years in and are getting a little overwhelmed, and it would be like, yes, I want to pay for your services. And that they won't, that they'll continue to source and do this really great work without just being like, fine, I'm going to go fall into conventional food system. Mackenzie, how many slides do we have left here? I'm thinking
We have just one. It's just this one.
Yeah. And I think, this one we don't even really need to talk about, but it, just the importance of kind of figuring out how to weave this in the innovation phase for businesses, because when they're shifting sourcing later, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And so how do we intervene at those early stages and say, this is possible, you can build your business differently, we're here to help. And then next slide.
Just a group discussion, which we've kind of already started undertaking. Yep.
Yeah, totally. We've been doing, and I don't know if there's any wrap up that you want to do, Mackenzie. I think you have a
Yeah, I just have a quick request of everybody. As Hannah mentioned, this is a project that's part of a grant that we received in collaboration with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. And we have to, as I'm sure you guys are all familiar with from having written many grants, show some quantifiable metrics. And so one of them is just to say that we've been able to share some of this curriculum with up to 100 people, which will not be a problem, but how they will track it is via a survey. So I'll put a link in the chat because I know that this this hyperlink won't work for you guys. And if you have a moment, you know, in the next couple of days, it's 3 questions. It should take no time at all, but that would be tremendous just so that we can, you know, apply again.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for the robust discussion. And I'm so glad there's so many experts in the room. Nikki, did you want to add anything from your perspective? I mean, you're just, again, someone who I'm always pointing to when I'm talking to a new business, like you can do things differently. It doesn't, you don't have to go the same way.
Well, gosh, I don't know. Everyone covered so much great stuff. There is one thing I think I like to tell new business owners. You know, I think I like to give them ideas, like there are so many different ways you can do things, right? And being a year-round food processor, I always look at it like, this is my responsibility to help the farmers get rid of stuff that they can't get rid of otherwise, because I have the processing facility and I can figure out ways to use it, right? So that's part of, you know, how we do Salsa of the Week. It's to stay creative and use what we have in our system, right? But I also like to tell new businesses too that, because I think, and I felt this way when I started, and I think a lot of people hear these kind of conversations and they get overwhelmed, like, how am I going to do this? I can't find everything year round, seasonally, locally. How is this going to be done? And the reality is, like, it's really difficult, depending what your business is, to do all that all the time. And so you can find ways to really support your local farmers and use local produce as much as you can. That is a success. But when you're making, like, I'm making fresh salsa year round, I am not going to get tomatillos year round. I'm not going to get limes ever locally, right? So you have to, you know, give some grace and not make people feel like, okay, if you don't get it all, you're not doing well, right?
Hey, Nikki, thanks for calling that out. This is Kim. I used to own a business that I made collard wraps, and I really wanted to, like, I had a specific collard wrap that I liked. Like, you become a connoisseur of the thing that you're doing, and so I liked a particular variety, like with Kristen's peppers, and I wanted to see if I could get as many farmers, you know, in my region to grow them as I could. And it was like, it was a lot of work, but it was worth it. In the end, I always had to supplement with OGC, and I just knew that. So I would have like 6 cases on, you know, back in the cooler, and the farmers knew we were in production on Monday and Wednesday, and they brought them in, and I bought as much as I could, but farmers could never grow enough. So, you know, you just come up with a hybrid model, but it was developing those connections, like figuring out, you know, because it was incredible for those farmers that really wanted that steady income, right? It was like growing a crop instead of having to do the CSA or farmers market kind of smaller scale. So I think that with our network that we're building here and the hub to hub connections that we're hatching, I think we're going to be able to create these efficiencies where even if the collards are grown, you know, way the hell across the state, I know that they can get on a truck and get to me wherever I need them, kind of thing. So I think we're getting there. Hybrid model.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point in really thinking about small business as a way to support other small business. So when we contract with farmers year round, they know how much they can judge how much income they're going to receive and count on that income, because we're agreeing to buy what we ask them to grow, right? So that is a huge source of keeping money in our local economies and supporting other small businesses, which is the really exciting layer for me, I think.
The heart of it. Yeah, we have all these slides for other parts. So I'm like, oh, everybody here, they already know why it's so important to source local. So we skipped all those slides that we tell for everybody else. But that's the heart of the matter, of course, that we're supporting each other and building a beautiful, amazing food system together.
This is an incredible conversation, and I think it's my favorite conversation about packaged food that I have ever had, because I feel like it's really, I don't know about the rest of you, but it feels like it's really illuminating the place that food hubs and might be able to take a role in supporting local purchasing and packaged foods. I often go with Hannah, you started out with the reality of packaged food, and when you're asked to scale, you suddenly like almost get pushed into conventional food purchasing to support the needs of your scale, and seeing the different ways, Nikki, that you've talked about, Kristen, that you've talked about, and how you can manage your sourcing in a way that is more flexible is really exciting to me. And it seems like there's a real role that food hubs might be able to take in participating, supporting that.
I hope so.
Do we have other questions for our wonderful guest speakers today? Nikki, I'm so glad to see you on this call, by the way. Are there other questions? Thanks, Yael. Thanks, Hannah, for spearheading getting this to this group. I might ask you to do it to some other groups in some other states.
Sweet.
Sweet, yeah, right? Mackenzie and everybody for participating. Do we have any off-topic burning questions? We have about almost 10-ish minutes left, or anything that we want to bring up while we have this entire group together today.
Hey, Senior, I'd like to say something.
Yeah, I always like to hear from you.
Well, definitely, I appreciate all that's being said. And I think Hannah had touched on an issue, or one of the major issues that's beginning to percolate, and I'm pretty sure you're familiar with it. Right now, with the state of Oregon beginning to take a very strategic look at the ag, the food and the beverage industry, similar to what they did with the CHIP Acts and such, in concert with a number, I don't know if Sarah's on the line, still on the line, but a lot of what the concerns are, those are some of the issues that are being brought to the table about our food and beverage and our ag community. And it really is. And I think some of it is probably through people like, I think Shantae is possibly on the committee, and Hannah and myself as well. Some of it is we need to find a way to really coalesce, because we're still kind of living in silos. And I think that's one thing I appreciate about what we've been doing for the last couple of years with the hubs. We're beginning to bring some of those issues to the table, to where it doesn't take somebody 4 or 5 years to learn the process, where 20 people went through the process already. Okay, so the information is there. It's just bringing it to the table so we all can know it's there. But again, I think Hannah had brought that up, that the Oregon Business Council and such, they have a mandate to really engage at a state level with our agricultural, our food and beverage communities. And many of the hubs are a part of that. And some of it is, for instance, I didn't know until recently, I went to the IFT, the Institute of Food Technologists, to know that there's an association for trucks, food trucks. Okay, literally food trucks. But we haven't, and we being the state, haven't dissected to find out, where are those food trucks acquiring their food from? Is it local? Is it, regional outlets or such? So those are some of the things I think, again, listening to everybody, again, excited about that. But participation is going to be a big plus with the community from the food hubs. And that's all I'll say.
Participation. We got a bunch of thumbs up and heads nodding on that. You're right, Willie. About talking about the silos, and that's in so many ways the point of this network and Hannah Kohlberg's network, and the fact that our networks participate with each other is trying to break down some of
Yes.
those silos and
Yes.
get the improvements that we're all hoping for.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Great discussion today. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks everybody for participating. Thanks, Sarah and Kim, for sharing what you learned. This group is amazing, as per always. See you next time.
Bye.